Hello, welcome back to another episode of Tim Roadie Rides Motorbikes. The sun is shining, praise be, and I just want to talk quickly about how I think even sports bikes are sensible in a way because they're designed just to do a job, which is to go very fast around a racetrack. Adventure bikes are very sensible because they're designed to go very far in great comfort and do a job. I like motorbikes that exist for no real purpose other than to put a massive shit-eating grin on your face, like my Hypermotard. And like this, the Triumph Rocket 3R. It's got the world's biggest production motorbike engine, and I think it's quite silly. We're going to do a quick review and we'll find out if it's actually any good as well as having big numbers. Yes, this is the Triumph Rocket 3, as in Arabic numeral 3, not Roman numeral 3, because that was the one that came out in 2004. This came out, well, 2019. It's a £20,000 motorbike, and to be honest, the Rocket has always been a bit of an icon. I remember back in 2004 when this came out, I was at university. I was sad enough to have a poster of one of these on my bedroom wall at university. Yeah, that's probably why I stayed single for quite a long time. But it's a proper bruiser of a bike that, although it is ostensibly a cruiser, does its own thing. And I remember when Triumph released it, they released a very silly video of them developing it and kind of growing the engines in laboratories and avoiding badgers and doing wheelies and loads of cool stuff with Kevin Carmichael. So yeah, it's always been kind of part of why I like biking. So let's find out if this new 2.5 litre, I think I've said already, £20,000 motorcycle is actually any good to live with and ride. Now, you're probably thinking that I'm going to say something like the reason you buy this bike is purely because of the massive engine. Well, yeah, the reason you should buy this bike is mostly because of the massive engine. 2.5 litres are actually 2,458cc. I don't think that would have looked as nice there. Inline triple. And yeah, the pistons are 110 mil. The stroke is shorter than in the old 2.3 litre one, so it's revvier. Revs out to a 7,000 RPM redline. It's got 167 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 221 Newton meters of torque from 4,000 RPM. So yeah, they've got more power than before, the same torque, but the same torque is lower and hangs on longer than in the old engine, which apparently, I never rode it, wasn't exactly short of grunt. It's got 10,000 mile service interval, so it's not a very stressed thing. It's almost like a lorry engine. I think it sounds fantastic. This bike is Euro 5 compliant. I think it's loud enough, to be honest. I know people are already doing aftermarket exhausts, and yes, there are 2 exhausts here. There's actually one on the other side, like on the old bike, so 3 exhausts for 3 cylinders. And it is a biblically good engine. We'll get onto that in the riding bit, but if this doesn't put a smile on your face, you are officially deader than insert recently dead celebrity here. Now, if you found me through all my car stuff like I do and you're a car person predominantly, you might not know the motorbike manufacturers don't really release acceleration figures because your 0 to 62 mile an hour time is dictated really by how skillful, brave, silly you are, and physics really limits everything above a certain power level because the bike just wants to wheelie and spit you off the back. Triumph actually set a Guinness World Record on this bike back in 2019. It'll do 0 to 62 in 2.73 seconds, which is a Guinness World Record for a motorbike production road motorbike. Top speed is limited electronically to 138 mile an hour, because I guess above that, it gets a bit terrifying given that this weighs 290 kilograms. Yeah, the Rocket 3 is definitely not a lightweight bike by any stretch of the imagination. However, it is 40 kilos lighter than the old one thanks to an aluminium frame. That 290 kilo figure is a dry weight. You don't actually have to add much for the fuel because it's only got an 18 litre fuel tank. You've got sports bike spec brakes, you've got Brembo style levers up front, you've got fully adjustable Showa suspension. So the chassis of this bike is actually a proper job. It's not just some soft, baggy old crap Triumph found in the closet when they thought, oh God, we've made this engine, what do we do with it? That said, the Rocket 3 does have a massive 24 centimetre rear tyre and a 15 centimetre one up front, and if you don't really know your bikes, that is, well, it's bloody huge, and it's usually a recipe for slow, stodgy handling. Hopefully Triumph have managed to engineer a way around that. We shall find out in the riding bit. Spoiler, they have. What else do you need to know, really? Let's look at some of the details, because there are several key things about this bike that I quite like that you might not know. I know with a bike like this you might be a bit intimidated about the size of it, so this is a segment called Fat Man in T-shirt, sits on Triumph Rocket 3. That's what I look like on it. I'm 6'3", I am mostly leg, to be fair, and gut and Haribo. Does it feel heavy? I can paddle it around, he says. If it's not in gear, I find it quite easy to paddle around because it's got a low seat height. If you park on a slope and you need to reverse it up a slope, you're a little bit screwed because there's no electric reverse like on a Goldwing or a K1600 bagger, anything like that. So yeah, I mean, it's got quite a low seat height, so realistically it's not that intimidating to ride. You can kind of feel the weight, it's all way down low. Yeah, I'd want to paddle it around because I do that with most bikes anyway, just so I don't drop it. But yeah, the centre of gravity is low, so it's not that scary to move around, to be honest, unless you've got legs made of matchsticks. The Rocket 3 gets shaft drive rather than a chain, so there's no maintenance to be done on the bike. It's worth pointing out as well that the rear brake is radially mounted. Normally you only get that on sports bikes and fast bikes up front. Normally the back brake's just a cheap single piston jobby. Not here, that's a front brake off a sports bike basically from 10 years ago. Basically Triumph knows that this is a fast, heavy bike and it's going to take some stopping, so good attention to detail / stopping you dying. Actually, while I've got you here, I should point out lots of the nuts and bolts on this £20,000 motorbike are already quite heavily corroded from a winter's worth of salt. I would have expected better. Obviously this bike has been used and abused by journalists, and if you actually owned one of these, you'd probably be quite religious about either not using it in winter or washing it very thoroughly when you do. But yeah, black mark, Triumph. Now, if you're anything like me, you probably like doing big miles on bikes, going on tours, whether it's around Europe, Australia, America, wherever is handy. And Triumph does do a slightly more touring version of this bike called the Rocket 3 GT, which gets a lower seat, the foot pegs are moved forward, and you get a little pillion backrest here to stop them flying off the back of all that torque. What's quite cool is the pillion pegs, even on this bike, they fold out and they fold back up to clean up the look of the bike, so you don't have to unbolt anything when you want to look really cool riding solo, stopping at coffee shops with your biker friends. They just fold away and it's quite satisfying to do. So yeah, top marks for that Triumph, although I think the Ducati Diavol did something similar folding out here, didn't it? But there we go, at least you've done that. There are a few other details that I like as well around here. Excuse the shaky cam footage. The oil filler is a really satisfying metal thing. The fuel filler, likewise, although you then have to put a key in it despite the fact the bike is keyless. That's a bit annoying. And the radiator coolant filler is chunky metal as well. Everything about this bike is pretty chunky, like the 47mm forks, they look really good. As I mentioned, it's keyless, so you just have the key in your pocket and hit this button, which might be out of focus. You hit this button, hang on, let's try that again. You hit this button to turn it on, and it says Rocket 3, good afternoon Rocketeer, I think you can change your name. And the dash is pretty straightforward, pretty simple. Hopefully, you can't see this at all because my ND filter's taking it out, there we go. Right, hopefully you can see that. You've got two styles on this bike. You've got this kind of traditional one which I would use with the revs around there and the speedo there, or you've got this one which tries to make it look like an old-fashioned watch, which I wouldn't bother with. You get an analog speedo and you get the tiny rev counter there. So yeah, I much prefer number one. It's like being at the opticians, isn't it? Is it better with this eye or without? Anyway, you've got trip computers showing MPGs, your average speed, the time, all that kind of stuff. It's got a fuel range readout. I've been getting about, well, there you go, you can see about 37 mpg out of this, which is about 180 miles to a tank, something like that, but realistically it's going to be closer to 150 miles to a tank. And that is about it. It's got 6-axis IMU with lean sensitive ABS, lean sensitive traction control, all that good stuff. Let's go and ride the bloody bike now rather than talking about this screen, because that's not really interesting, is it? Bah. Right, let's go for a ride on the Rocket 3. It's got keyless go, so I just hit that button to turn it on and the screen slowly comes into life. What I love about this bike, or what I've enjoyed about this bike, is the way it connects you to the engine. Let's just fire it up, he says. Let's just fire it up. And it twists slightly to the left, and when you flip the throttle, you sense the weight of that massive crank kind of giving you gyroscopic forces, twisting it to the left. It's just fun. It's not as pronounced as on an air-cooled BMW Boxer, but it's there all the same. Now, I've done about 300 miles on this bike now, and what I would say, kind of the most impressive thing almost, is how quickly you get used to riding it in terms of the ergonomics. My feet, they're not forward, they're not back, they're kind of 90-degree down from my kneecaps. It all feels quite natural. And when you come to a stop, the weight is so low, you don't panic putting your foot out, you just get used to it. And I would say after about 5 minutes you've uncovered most of the slight foibles, such as the way it turns into corners a lot better if you've got a bit of throttle on, which is slightly weird, but if you turn it on a closed throttle, it turns it a bit more slowly than if you've got a slightly open throttle. Anyway, let's take it for a bit of a country road blast and see what it's like. Alright, cold tyres, but let's go. Okay, that's it is sodding quick, so yeah, if you give it the full beans in first, the traction control kicks in, but it's kind of subtle, we don't really notice it other than the light flickering. I rode this, as I said, in the rain the other day, and on the M25 in third gear I was getting wheel spin on a part throttle. It's ridiculous. I didn't really know because all I got was traction control light flickering, but honestly, overtaking someone in third gear at half throttle, it was flickering and flashing and all sorts. The next thing you notice really is when you start riding this, you know, 60 miles an hour on a country road, you don't really have to think about what you're doing. Some big, long, heavy bikes like this, you really need to plan your corners. There's a little bit of that, but honestly, you can just kind of get up to a corner, do your braking, drop your shoulder, drop in, and punch out of the corner like few other bikes can. You end up riding this in fourth gear most of the time, to be honest, because from, you know, 2,500 RPM, it just is off. It's so rapid. But yeah, it's an easy bike to live with. Like, I've been filtering on this. I've been kind of doing what you would call commuting, going to the shops and stuff like that. It's not awkward. I've been taking it to the supermarket. I've been using it as I would any other bike. It's not especially really long. I know it's got a long wheelbase, but I can park it on the street and it doesn't poke out into the road, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I was very surprised really. I thought it was going to be a bit of a liability, a bit of a nuisance, like, you know, having a pet elephant outside your house, but it's not like that at all. The only time you really notice that back tyre is in first gear roundabout stuff, where it does sometimes feel a bit clunky and you feel the shaft drive jerking about a bit at kind of really low speeds, but, you know, cover the back brake, slip the clutch, and it's fine. What a beautiful day this is, sorry. Right, let's do 30 to 60 in second gear. Please, baby Jesus, look after me. Let's go. Traction control. Oh, there's nothing like that in the motorbike world. I imagine the supercharged Kawasaki's come close, but they're going to have a different kind of character to that. This is just from nothing, from 2,500 RPM, whatever gear you're in. Look, fourth gear, that's 50 to some other speed. Yeah, it's just, yeah, the grunt is brutal, the shove is, it's just lovely, but the fueling is good. It's easy to ride at all speeds. There's nothing snatchy or coarse about it. If anything, you kind of feel that Triumph could have made it feel a bit nastier and a bit edgier. Certainly the exhaust note and everything, it's not the loudest, it sounds okay. They could have made an edgier version of this, but, you know, with the weight and the torque, you could probably get a bike that ties itself in knots. Speaking of knots, the brakes are hugely good, as you would hope, the front ones. The back brake's really strong as well. Honestly, you can get yourself, well, not in trouble, but just coming out of corners with the traction control light flickering becomes the norm. What I would say is, when you really start going gangbusters in corners, you'll start scraping stuff, but you've got a lot of lean before you do. don't go thinking this is like an old Bonneville or a Bobber or something. I swear it's got more ground clearance than those bikes, at least this R version, and you end up riding it like you would a Speed Triple or a Naked. It's odd. Well, it's not odd, it is odd, but I like it. It's good odd. Second gear, you almost sense the front going light over crests, and John Hogan of Superbike website, magazine and Bike World TV, he reliably informs me that you can wheelie one of these. I won't be trying it, but you certainly sense, despite that wheelbase, it's got the shove to lift the front up. Yeah, I think perhaps the thing I'm most impressed about, really, other than the shove of the engine, it's just the flow that you can get into this bike on a twisty road, not just in a straight line. You get into a rhythm of dropping your shoulder, counter steering, and you know, the steering isn't the fastest, but it's pretty bloody quick considering. Like, if you want to change lanes on a motorway quickly, you can. You just punch the handlebars, and it doesn't wobble, it doesn't get into a diz, it just does what you want it to. What don't I like about the way it rides? I think I mentioned really low speeds around roundabouts and stuff. You have to keep a bit of throttle on, otherwise it starts understeering a bit, and that's a slightly weird characteristic. I don't really know the science and the physics behind that. I guess it's something to do with the cylinder layout, the shaft drive and the wheelbase, some combination there. The ride isn't like uber plush, but it's pretty good. It's pretty good. And you know, I found myself kicked out of the seat once or twice. Here's some bumps. I mean, there's enough mass there that it's reassuring when you're mid-corner and hit a bump. It doesn't like kick you offline. Other than that, I don't think I've mentioned that the exhaust burbles quite a lot on the overrun. To an extent, it's a bit ridiculous. I went up Box Hill, which is a big hill near where I live, and I came down it the other day, just engine braking in second gear, off the gas, and the entire way down just going pop, 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 pop. Got a bit silly, frankly, but I like that. It's a bit character, isn't it? It's tempting to say this is just a bike that's an expensive toy, but I think it's got a lot more capability, and that doesn't really do justice to it. I would quite like one of these to go touring on. Admittedly, motorway speeds, as I've said, or as I'm about to say probably, aren't that comfortable. Okay, that's the country road bit. I'm about to get into a boring bit. I'll just cut to me riding this at motorway speeds and I'll tell you about that, then we'll come back. That's the kind of reaction you get on a rocket, admittedly from a Triumph owner. But yeah, this bike definitely turns heads. Two Triumphs, yeah, look at it. Just as fast than your Street Triple RS, I'm afraid. At least to 130. Let's go! Right, there we go. I just wanted to do a comprehensive review, so let's talk about what it's like at motorway speeds. I'm doing 75 now. I've got a reasonable amount of pressure on my chest. It is perfectly livable. I did about 100 motorway miles on this the other day in the rain, and it wants to cruise at about 80. 85, 90 is doable, but at that point you really get pushed back from the bars, and because your arms are stretched out quite far to the bars anyway, it gets a bit uncomfortable after an hour or so cruising at 80, 85. So yeah, you could definitely tour on it. You might want to look at fitting a screen just to take some of the wind blast off your chest. I'm normally a fan of wind blast, keeping you upright, but because the bars are quite far away, your arms end up a bit stretched. Comfort wise, it's fine. We've got a smooth bit of motorway, absolutely no problems. You've got cruise control, which you can flick on really easily with one press, and then you can munch big miles, or as big a miles as the 18 litre tank would let you do. Otherwise, this is a really good cruiser. It's not like the X-Diavel or the Diavel, where it does just pound the base of your spine and doesn't make for a very comfortable experience. This isn't the softest, but it doesn't jolt right up your spine like you're sitting on the back wheel. It's got reasonably plush suspension. Right, let's go back to you, Tim, for an outro. Right, first up, apologies for the rubbish in-car outro about motorbike. I lost the footage that I filmed with the Rocket. It went back 4 days ago, and to be honest, I really, really miss it. Like, on an emotional level, it's just a lot of fun, whether you're pootling or whether you're riding it really hard. And it's surprising how aggressively you can ride it, and it just doesn't really tie itself in knots. Obviously, the key attraction is that engine with the torque. It's phenomenal. It never gets boring just because you're never revving it that hard. You can go from 2000 RPM and it just rips your arms off. It's wicked fun. It handles brilliantly. The only real sticking points are motorway comfort if you're tall like me isn't great, just the wind blast with your outstretched arms, but the GT version might be a bit better. I haven't tried it. You can put a screen on it obviously to get around that. The fuel tank is only 18 litres and it only gets about 35 mpg, so fuel range ain't great. Rear tyre is going to be expensive, but so what? It's a 20 grand bike. The bike's expensive as well, but it's a good bike. And it isn't just a toy. You could tour on it. You could go scratching with your mates on it. You can just use it all year round, frankly. Oh yeah, that's the other downside. The fasteners were a bit crap. But overall, I really love it. And I miss it a lot. So yeah, well done Triumph for making a bike that has no real purpose other than just to entertain. More people should do that. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like, comment, subscribe, hit my bell, and I'll see you next time when I won't be charging an electric Audi at a petrol station. My life is all glamour. Goodbye.